like to welcome everybody. As you can see by the name printed on the bottom left corner of my squaricle, my name is Lance Straight, and I am the president of the New York Society for General Semantics. And for some reason that might have something to do with the pandemic, we have taken to holding our events and meetings virtually rather than in person. And so we normally hold events about once a month and have panel discussions or talks on all kinds of different subjects. This time around on jazz, next time, who knows? But in any event, that is, maybe we could, Tom, maybe we could mute folks so it can, because I'm getting an echo.
Sure.
Anyway, so we do this and we hold programs that we think are interesting and of course have some relationship to general semantics, this being the New York Society for General Semantics. So I do want to say that we've been doing these programs now for some years, and we don't charge any membership fee, but we do encourage folks to join the Institute of General Semantics. As membership in the Institute of General Semantics includes subscription to the premier general semantics journal called Etc., which is edited by Tom Gencarelli, who is up there on the square and will be one of the co-hosts of this meeting. However, if you do feel so moved, there is a donation button on our website as well. But in any event, we're very pleased to bring you this program today. It's been kind of exciting, and you know, to be perfectly frank, I just stumbled on this item online from NPR that was titled "Temporary Trio Creates a Quirky Groove on General Semantics," with Kevin Whitehead doing an interview, and that led to checking in with our various jazz aficionados to find out, to figure out where this was coming from, and that is where Tom and Ed Taiwaniak come in. But I'll give a brief, or maybe not so brief, introduction to the session before turning it over to them. And the occasion, again, is the recent release of an album entitled General Semantics by the jazz trio Geof Bradfield, Ben Goldberg, and Dana Hall. And that truly is cause for celebration and also a wonderful excuse for our NYSGS meeting tonight. And the recordings were made available for digital download this past September, on CD and vinyl this past October, produced by Delmark Records. And on their website, the description of the album goes like this: the collaborative trio of Ben Goldberg on clarinet and contralto clarinet, Geof Bradfield on soprano and tenor saxophones and bass clarinet, and Dana Hall on percussion, explores new directions on general semantics. Their Delmark Records debut features original music by the trio, as well as unique interpretations of Duke Ellington, Cecil Taylor, and Hermeto Pascoal. The unusual instrumentation, especially the lack of a bassist, enables the musicians to transcend traditional instrument roles of accompaniment, improvisation, and interaction, and create music that embraces form and harmony alongside freedom and spontaneous improvisation. And we're so happy to have Bradfield, Goldberg, and Hall together with us this evening. And just to give you some background, Ben Goldberg, clarinetist and composer, currently resides in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is one of the advantages of our meeting virtually, is that we are able to connect really all around the world here. Ben's career has been one of constant curiosity and experimentation. The New York Times noted that his music conveys a feeling of joyous research into the basics of polyphony and collective improvising, the constant usefulness of musicians intuitively coming together and pulling apart. And he has released over 30 records of his own compositions, and his many groups include Invisible Guy, Tin Hat, Orphic Machine, and Unfold Ordinary Mind. He's a member of the music faculty at University of California, Berkeley, widely known in the Bay Area for his groundbreaking work with his new Klezmer Trio. With us tonight as well is Geof Bradfield, and Geof has shared stages throughout North America, Europe, Russia, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East with many jazz luminaries. His work is featured on over 50 CDs, including 7 albums as leader that have garnered accolades from the New York Times, the LA Times, Downbeat, Chicago Tribune, and NPR. And his most recent large-scale work is Yes and Music for 9 Improvisers, was commissioned by Chamber Music America's New Jazz Works program with generous support of the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and features a nonet of top-flight Chicago and New York artists. Bradfield has gotten 2 Grammy nominations, won the Grammy once, and is professor of jazz studies at Northern Illinois University, as well as having given master classes and lectures at the Brubeck Institute, the Manhattan School of Music, the Jazz Education Network Conference, and many other places. And of the trio, last and most certainly not least, is Dana Hall, drummer, percussionist, composer, band leader, and ethnomusicologist. But most important of all is the fact that he grew up in Brooklyn. We very much admire that, Dana. And there he was exposed to jazz and soul music at an early age. And after completing his education in aerospace engineering at Iowa State, he received his Bachelor of Music degree from William Patterson College. I taught there for 1 year. That's out in Wayne, New Jersey. And his master's degree in composition and arranging from DePaul University. And he's presently a distinguished special trustees fellow pursuing his doctorate in ethnomusicology at the University of Chicago. He's interested in issues as an ethnomusicologist, issues of ethnicity, identity, and temporality, popular musics of the world, music as protest and resistance, and musics of both the African continent and the African diaspora. His dissertation is a historical ethnography of Philly soul during the Black Power movement. And I'd like to say I would like to read that when you get it done, so make sure to get it done. He's both a member of the Terrell Stafford Quintet and music director of the Chicago Jazz Ensemble, former regular member of the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band, and has also played with the Des Moines and Cedar Rapids Symphonies. And he is director of jazz studies at DePaul University School of Music. We're also very pleased to be joined tonight by a local luminary, Ann Phillips, singer, composer, arranger, conductor, and producer. She's recorded several solo albums, from the classic Born to Be Blue to her recent release, Ballet Time, and her children's musical, The Great Gray Ghost of Old Spook Lane. It's been published by Samuel French. It's also her environmental piece, What Are We Doing to Our World, produced at Duke University, and her short operas, most recently That Certain Age, performed by Chelsea Opera, has been produced by opera companies in many cities. Her jazz opera, Bending Towards the Light, a Jazz Nativity, has been described as a most extraordinary and powerful blending of opera and jazz, absolutely truthful to both genres. We're pleased then to have the session moderated by two of our old friends, Ed Tawaniak, out on the West Coast, a former trustee of the Institute of General Semantics and a professor of communication emeritus at St. Mary's College of California, also a former editor of Etc., and our wonderful Tom Gencarelli, current editor of Etc., trustee of the Institute of General Semantics, member of the board of the New York Society for General Semantics. And also he's got a band too called Blue Race, which he's too shy to plug, so I'll do it for him. Several CDs now. Is it four?
Three.
Four CDs? Three. Well, it'll be four soon. And anyway, I'm very happy now to shut up and turn things over to Tom and Ed and our wonderful panelists. Thank you all.
Ed,
Thanks, Lance.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, I think the way to kick off the rest of this is to start with a piece of music from the record, and to start off with the title track. Play it.
You got it. Hang on. Shoot. Of course, it just, hang on one second. Here we go. Good stuff. Let's start off, Ben, by asking the question that is probably at the tip of most people's tongue right now. And why General Semantics as title? How did that come about?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting the three of us to participate with you guys in this meeting. And it's a beautiful surprise to be invited, and I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, how did the record get called General Semantics? We needed to think of a title for the record that we made. And I said that my father used to be in the field of general semantics, and I always thought that that was kind of a cool phrase, general semantics. And maybe it could be used as the title of a record, and Geof and Dana agreed, and so we called the record General Semantics. So
how was your father involved with General Semantics?
Well, my father, his name was Alvin Goldberg, and he was a professor of speech communication at the University of Denver. And so part of that discipline, I think, involves the study of general semantics, or maybe even it's possible that the discipline of speech communication came out of the study of general semantics. I'm not exactly sure how it all works. But when I was a teenager, I said to my dad, I want to be an intellectual. And he said, fine. And he handed me a copy of Harry Weinberg's book called Levels of Knowing and Existence. He said, read this. So I did. So that's about, that represents about the extent of my personal understanding.
It's official now. You are
with general semantics.
It's a thick intellectual web, and you're in good company with just what you've read with Weinberg alone. Real quick side story here that you shared with me about the word is not the thing.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I mean, really when I was like 3 or 4, I guess, or something, I guess both my parents, my mother and my father, were both involved in some way studying general semantics, and they told us the word is not the thing. The word is not the thing. So we would march around the house singing, the word is not the thing, the word is not the thing, hi-ho the dairy-o, the word is not the thing. So it kind of, it's bred in the bone, you know.
See, you did become an intellectual. As we'll hear throughout, as we get to listen to more cuts from the album, one of the things that is most impressive with the collaborative work that the three of you have done is through the instrumentation, you've allowed yourself the space for true collaboration and for true inspiration in the moment. Dana, maybe you could talk a little bit about the making of the record in general and the title track in particular, General Semantics.
Sure. It's right around this time I had a few different projects that were all on the front burner and boiling over. And I remember that Geof and Ben, they kept saying, hey, if you got any music, you should send some music. Hey, if you got any music, send some music. And so then the dates came up. And so I said, well, we're playing whatever you guys got. And I got the next record. So the plan was for me to contribute a lot of material to the next recording, which we were supposed to be doing last month, September, October. So I remember when we were getting the project together, thinking about the way that I could contribute in a deeper way, in a different way through my playing, because my pen wasn't going to be represented in the project. And in listening back to what we did and thinking about the way that I frame general semantics, and I have a solo project that is about sounds and semiosis, is what part of the title of that solo project is. And so thinking about the ways that we ascribe meaning to symbols and signs, the way that we use language, and language represents and ascribes different meaning to our actions, to the things that we do, the things that we play, the way that we experience music. I thought general semantics was perfect when thinking about that framing of what those, that semiosis, semantics, symbolism, and not thinking so abstractly, of course, about those words and the meaning of those words. One of the challenges that we're faced with today, and I think it's an ongoing challenge, is the word jazz, and thinking about what jazz is supposed to be to certain people. And also privileging that word and aligning it with entertainment or marketability, and that being divorced in some manner with serious music, if you will. Right. And so thinking about not having a bass functioning instrument, but in fact having 3 bass functioning instruments in this group, or thinking about 2 members supporting a melody, or all 3 of us being simultaneously supportive. We're really flipping on its head whatever we're supposed to be doing, supposed to be playing jazz, supposed to be playing free experimental music, supposed to be doing arrangements of well-known songs in a new way. I don't even remember what your question was, but I know I know that when we were recording this and when we were thinking about the title, I thought that's perfect. General semantics is perfect for what we're doing, and particularly for what I do. Like listening to some of the material that I played, I'm thinking it's some of the most joyous and joyful playing that I have on record. Being able to think about a through line of parade music and swing and orchestrational parts like I play on Half the Fun, and just sort of thinking about the scope of things that I could do as a musician. This is probably the project where I'm able to do the most of those and not have it be pigeonholed under one umbrella of a particular title or genre of music. So does that answer your question?
I was just going to say, if you were wondering, yes, you passed the test. You answered the question. I want to pick up on something you said that was important, and bring Ann in for a moment. When Dana mentioned the importance of continuing to ask the question, what is jazz? You, I'm sure, asked that many times as you began to think about the synthesis between jazz and opera. Tell us a little bit about the question, what is jazz today?
Well, I have to say first that I was really more of a jazz person. That whole thing about opera just happened that a singer who had an opera company heard some of my music and asked me to write a short opera. And that was my dip into it. However, then I realized that I had really already written one, and that is the Jazz Nativity, because it's all sung, straight through, sung, played, by some of the great people. And when you were all talking about where your backgrounds, the musicians' backgrounds, I just thought, oh my God, we know so many people. Who was with the Carnegie Hall band? That's John Faddis, right? John Faddis has been a king several times and met his wife actually through the Jazz Nativity. And, but I should tell you really, I'd really like to read something. Charles Kuralt became our host about the 3rd year, and he loved the show. And he said, well, what do you want me to say? And I sort of said what I thought he ought to say in the beginning, but then he Kuraltized it, and it's beautiful. But there's one segment that I think answers one of your questions or talk. He said it's an old story and so forth. Then he said, tonight we're going to tell the old story in a new way, through the medium of jazz, and we hope you will find this fitting and seemly. It is a very spiritual story and jazz is a very spiritual music, the most spontaneous and personal form of musical expression. What you will hear tonight comes straight from the heart. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What better explanation of jazz?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. Geof, you and Ben do the share of the songwriting on the new album. How did your collaborative songwriting evolve for this project? Tell us a little bit about how that worked.
Well, I mean, really, the collaboration comes in the rehearsal process for the three of us, not in the actual writing process. So the collaboration in the writing process consisted of one of us starting a Dropbox folder and racing each other to see how much music we could stuff into it before we had rehearsals and gigs and recording crammed into this 4-day period. And Ben just kept writing more stuff, so I felt pressured, and I had to write some music to keep up. So we each contributed a handful of things to it. But in terms of, I mean, I can't speak to how Ben was thinking writing for this in particular. I wrote some things that were, I think actually in this case, everything I wrote was particularly for this. And then about half of what I wrote was original compositions, and half was arrangements of material that I was hoping in a way reflected our sort of we would have a wide shared Venn diagram of influences and interests. But I thought that these three things in particular that I chose to arrange sort of pointed to some iconoclastic figures that maybe not everybody in the world, with the exception of Ellington, is aware of, but that were strong influences for the three of us. So one of those was Cecil Taylor, his composition Air, and in particular Steve Lacy's arrangement of it. Lacy's a huge influence on I Know All of Us. Duke Ellington's Half the Fun, of course Ellington widely known, but this is not one of his most widely played pieces. And then finally Hermeto Pascoal, the great Brazilian composer, he wrote a song every day in the late 90s so that everybody would have a song for their birthday. He did it on a leap year, one song a day. So since this was going to be my first collaboration with Ben, I chose to arrange Ben's birthday song by Hermeto. So those, and Ben did all of his writing separately too. But then when we got together, the collaboration comes with, pulling the music up and saying, well, how do we want to approach this? What groove is Dana going to bring to this? What instruments should we play them on? We each have 2 or 3 instruments that we play. Dana has an array of percussion instruments and many choices across the kit. So we have a lot of small orchestrational possibilities, and all of that we worked out together. Does that seem accurate to you guys, Dana, Ben? I don't want to put words in your mouth via Zoom.
Yeah, basically Geof told us what to do and we did it.
If only that were true. I could come up with that on my own, but I couldn't.
How much rehearsal did you guys put into
One day?
it together? Just 1 day of rehearsal.
1 day, yeah.
4 hours or so.
Was it even a full day? Yeah.
No, it was about 4 hours.
Yeah.
Dana, I think you were suffering from a cold or something that
I was. Yeah.
And did you do all the cuts twice on the 2 nights you recorded, or just half and then the other half?
We did actually. So we played a few gigs around it to test out material, so that's helpful, of course. And then our first performance. Did we record first or do it live first? I can't remember.
I think we recorded first.
We played at Elastic.
Okay.
And then we went and we recorded, and then we had a live performance that we also recorded.
Right. So I think the live performance. The guy who recorded it is at Chicago Pro Musica, Ken Christensen's fantastic audiophile sound guy, and has just a beautiful room in his showroom there that he records music for. He's a close friend of Charlie Hayden's, the bass player, and Pat Metheny and a variety of folks. So he's recorded all of them privately for years and has a huge stash of old tapes and stuff. And so Ken sets up this thing where we recorded all day Friday in his space with no audience. And then Saturday night, he has a meetup kind of thing where he invites friends, and it's open to the public and packs the room for a donation-based concert. And you're in very close quarters. I mean, it's a small room. People are sitting on a couch a few inches away from us, and then he records that too. So we played all the music both live and in the studio. We used more studio cuts simply because the sound quality is a little better, but a couple things were so much more special live, we chose to use those. Like Hit Flip Switch is one of the live ones, and Half the Fun is also live. I don't remember which other ones, honestly.
Should we, because we want to play some of this stuff, should we play one of those?
Right. We could want to play Hit Flip Switch right now.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught the chat, but we're thinking that we'll try it a different way rather than that I'll play it from here, sharing it.
Yeah, if you go to advanced screen share options, there's a share computer sound button that you can hit, and it's going to sound a lot clearer.
Let's try that.
I am not seeing that.
I can do it from here too, if you like.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, this is what I do all day, right? Teach music all day. Oh, sorry, I'm disabled, so I can't do it unless you enable me.
I can do that. That I can fix. Okay, you should be enabled.
Cool. I'm just going to share computer sound, and we should be good. One sec.
Mm. Mm.
Geof, I think we'll let you play from your rig now for the rest. Yeah, sounded great. If I can take over for a minute as co-moderator with Ed. I'm thinking about what Dana was saying before and asking the question, about what we mean by the word jazz. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on music as communication, and in the beginning you put a couple of quotes in your acknowledgments page, and I had one from Aaron Copland where he said, "If a literary man says two words about music, one of them is wrong." And my professor Neil Postman, who is kind of famous in these parts in New York, he said, "Oh yeah, well, you tell Copland that if a musical man says two words about literature, they're both wrong," which I thought was a pretty good comeback. But beside the point, so all three of you are teachers, and you teach about music, but you're teaching to musicians, and so you're teaching to people who understand this symbolic system and are learning to communicate with each other, right? In the ways that are improvisatory and not. But the relationship between language and music, which I think is one of the reasons why, people in general semantics and in communication are interested in music. The relationship is a weird one. I mean, I'll ask the question, if you had to describe to a person who couldn't hear what the sound of a saxophone is, how do you do that? And so to play this kind of music and to talk to people who don't have the background and the training that you have, and maybe, just don't have it in them, right? Don't have the knack, the ability. How do you find talking to people about music and trying to put it into words, what you do?
Who is it that gets frequently misquoted in this area? Like the talking about music is like painting about dancing or something? Am I?
Something about architecture or something.
Yeah, I can never get this quite right.
Dancing about architecture.
Yeah, right. Dancing
Which
about
is all the time.
That might be possible, right? Yeah, I mean that's a tricky question. So can I just ask to maybe get a little? It was a long question, and I think Zoom for the day teaching music has seriously damaged my attention span. So if I could just clarify, you're talking about? It sounded like maybe two different things. So we teach music. So on one level, you're talking about teaching music to musicians who aren't as experienced, but on another level, you're talking about music maybe to somebody who doesn't have a background in music, right? Was it
Exactly.
both those
Yep.
things or one in
Yep.
particular?
No, both.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think they're sort of two different challenges, right? But also our job as a musician is to communicate through music primarily. So the first thing I think is that somebody doesn't have to articulate how they hear music the same way I do to have a valid way of hearing music. So somebody who's less expert in describing it in my particular jargon is not necessarily having a less complete experience for it. I mean, this is obviously true, right? We all have we can all have a very deep, as Anne mentioned, spiritual experience of music, whether or not we are the actors in that particular stage. So I think that in some ways, if I want to communicate something really specific about my music to a writer, a audience member, somebody else, it's really my job to figure out where that verbal middle ground is. And I guess in a way, this is where a lot of what you guys do comes in, at least as far as I understand it. Even the words I'm using to express music to Dana, who understands what I'm saying about music better than almost anybody else on the planet, I would say. We've been making music together for over 2 decades. We may not even mean exactly the same thing with the same set of words. But there's less mistake to be made if we're playing together and we're taking a certain action. Our interaction might be, we might each describe that interaction slightly differently. afterwards. We may choose different verbiage to describe it. I'm probably getting in deep waters here, probably getting in trouble. But the actual the layer above that of the interaction is much more pure in a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I guess if I'm talking about it with people who share a very similar mindset and background, it can be challenging to come up with the right words. I mean, I think that a good point to go back to is what Dana said earlier about the word jazz, that might mean something very, very different to a room full of jazz musicians. Even self-identified jazz musicians might mean something very different. And if you were asked me to define it, I would probably have to turn to the real to define it, to say, well, John Coltrane is jazz, Duke Ellington is jazz, Dizzy Gillespie is jazz. I would define Hermeto Pascual as jazz, but maybe he wouldn't define himself as jazz, and I don't think he would exclusively define himself as jazz. I would define almost all the music Dana and I make together as jazz, but I wouldn't necessarily define it as not something else. We also make chamber music together. We make improvised music. We make Brazilian music. We make rock music. We make classical music. We make all sorts of music together. I've probably really diverged a lot, and I would love some help. Dana, Ben, help me out here. Bail me out.
Well, I would just say,
yeah, go ahead, Ben. Yeah.
No, you go.
I was I think one of the challenges, particularly in remote learning, is working with students who are interested in figuring out what it is we do and thinking that it's something that is on a page, that there is language for it. I think that's really one of the misconceptions of what I try to do with my own creative work, is that I have a language that is specific for it and that it's all encompassing. Like, I think there are many languages, many words for what I do, and that it's difficult to transmit that unless you're feeling the heartbeats of everyone around you, right? It's hard to talk to people through Zoom about the social and cultural and political aspects of what we do. It's hard to look at the upper left-hand corner of a piece of music and it says swing, and that's supposed to engender something from the people that are playing. If you have 6 people, it might lead to 7 different interpretations of what that is. So a word is not really going to provide the listener or the musicians with the requisite and necessary information to be able to be successful with what they're doing or to understand what's happening. And I would go, there was a comment that was made about dancing. Like, for me, all the music that I make is dance music, right? And so for me, I'm never yelling at the dancers. I'm complimentary to the dancers. You know, right? There's a famous saying that I don't know who it's attributed to, but it's like, so I'll just say it's my own statement. If folks are dancing, don't change anything. Like, even if it's improvised music, I find that if I'm playing something and I see someone patting their foot, I don't change anything. I stay right there, because that means that what I'm doing is really the thing that I should be doing. It's making people move. It's making people feel something. So how can you give that a word? I don't think there's a word for that, right? So the disconnect, there's always this disconnect between language with a capital L and the music that we're making. And that chase, that dance for that language, that search for that language, because we're always searching for it, I think is where the magic happens, right? The constant search for, what is that thing that we did? I don't know. We did the thing. Okay. Tomorrow we'll do a different thing and hope we get some similar feeling. So that's sort of the addendum that I would add to what Geof said.
I have to say this, we have conversations with some of our performers on our website. Well, actually, we've put the whole thing out. It's online this year. And people like Steve Toure and Timmy Horner. And Tim Horner had a wonderful thing because I said something to him about what is your definition of a groove? And he went into the most wonderful definition of it and talked about where Roy Haynes plays, where Elvin Jones plays, where Grady Tate plays, somewhere right on top of it, feel like it's going to speed up, but it doesn't. And some are just right laid back. And it was like the same word could mean all of these different things, interpretations. If you go to look for the Jazz Nativity, actually on my site, annphillips.com, you'll see the conversations, and there's some absolutely wonderful things said by all of the musicians.
Perhaps, Anne, you could post a link in the chat if you have a sec.
Please.
That would be great.
Oh, can I? Can I put it in chat? I have it here. Okay. Oh, okay. Post a link. Well, this most simple thing to just use words and not do all of the bells and whistles is just annphillips.com. And that's my website, and everything is on it. We're, of course, if I had everybody's emails, I would send you all the stuff. But you can find out all about it there. And the conversations are all free before, without buying the ticket to the show. Ticket is $25, but you can see it from now until January 3rd. And it's quite something. You know Grady Tate, I suppose. Grady is a wonderful singer. He sings the opening songs. And Arturo Farrell takes a chorus that will just kill you. I can't explain it. You have to see it because it's never been done. All the biblical readings are sung by a soprano and a jazz vocal group, the New York Voices. So that's where the operatic part of it comes in. But that's original music, my own and Carol's, and then one piece by Dave Brubeck, because I know him, and his song God's Love Made Visible from La Fiesta de la Pasada. He has said us could use that. So that's the one piece that's not either original or PD, and he's in it. So what we were able to do this year was go through, would you believe, 30 years of video of many of the shows through the years, and strung it all together. So it's the show itself, but with a lot of great people, Tito Puente, Lionel Hampton, Dave Brubeck, goes on and on. Hard to explain.
We see hands coming up. I mean, typically, we do the program and we do Q&A at the end, and we also want to get to some more music. I don't know, Lance, if you want to override me, you can turn on your microphone and say so. But I actually wanted to go back to Dana's last point about teaching online and Zoom. And guys, what is going on with playing music and teaching music for you now? Is everything through this, and is it possible? Are you able to collaborate and communicate when we're relegated to this?
Well, I'll give a quick answer and then get out of the way for Ben or Dana. I mean, the teaching thing is possible, although it's not easy. And I mean, personally, I find it extremely fatiguing. And it's like, if you could take all the really fun parts out of teaching music, yet still teach music, that's basically like what it's like. I'm not bitter about it. I'm relieved to have a job, and I'm happy to interact with my students.
We're recording this, Geof.
I know. I am happy to interact with my students. They're all wonderful. And they have such positive attitudes. I appreciate it. None of them signed up for this when they came to college or grad school or whatever. It's just a miserable situation for somebody who's going to spend a year and a half of their 2 years studying for their master's for 1.5 years of it to be on Zoom. So that said, teaching is possible, and I'm sure we're all gradually finding tools that make it easier. Whether it's there are a few things that are fun, like I'm teaching arranging. I have a notation software program, Sibelius, hooked up to my keyboard, and I can arrange something in real time for them in a primitive way. It's not super refined, but I'm teaching them to write like big band saxophone solos today, and somebody gives me an example, I can pop it under the keyboard, put it in 4-part chorale voicing, shift it around to drop 2, and do it all in seconds, and they can see it move around on their screen and record it and look back at it later. So something like that is a kind of brilliant use of technology I would probably never bothered with. I could have done it in the classroom, but I just wouldn't have thought to do it. So every once in a while, you get some special bonus like that where you're like, well, actually, I'll keep that. And I would say that everybody's gotten more facile with microphones and audio interfaces and all the stuff that we used to say, oh, I don't deal with that. I just play the saxophone or whatever. Now we all have to do it. And I'm of the three of us, I'm the real Luddite in the room, and even I'm getting better at it. Those guys are pros in this area. So that's true. But on the playing side, it was nice to do some outdoor concerts while the weather held. You still have some great fires going on in California, Ben, so it'll probably be warm all winter there if you want to keep playing. But for us in Chicago, we're probably done with outside, and so what we're left with are some streaming concerts and venues that are able to do that and that have enough space on weeks where we all feel safe enough to go outside and do that in a room together. And as a wind player, I'm a person that people are in danger playing with, so we're all conscious of that potential too. So I'll leave it to the rest of these guys.
I don't have anything to add. I think Geof summed it up very well.
I mean,
it's kind of a drag trying to teach music on Zoom,
yeah,
especially if you're trying to teach a class that's based on playing in an ensemble or that's dealing with the skills that we want to develop in the students in order to play in an ensemble. Then you're getting into some very bizarre territory these days.
Do you think they'll ever figure out how to get rid of the lag so I can play while the singer is singing?
I doubt it.
There are a number of programs that
do it.
Latency to, but it's still not anything that musicians appreciate like deeply. We always feel when there's a little bit of a lag.
Yeah.
I think that another attribute or sort of silver lining of remote teaching has been really having an opportunity to get students to listen more critically. We've been able to do a lot of listening, and I've been able to share a lot of music with students and take the time to walk them through my own personal experiences with the music to unlock experiences for them in ways that they can negotiate the music and other musics that are similar just by closely listening and experiencing the music in a way that is not so passive, which I think many, particularly music students, they get something together for the moment so that they can move on to the next thing, or they think I need to learn how to do this so that I can do this other thing later, which is supposedly harder. And so they are passive listeners rather than thinking actively about, oh, I can really take this and take a macro view of the music to gain some insight into it that is more universal. And so I think I've really appreciated the opportunity to do that with my students in a way that I hadn't been able to do at the collegiate level for the last 16 years that I've been teaching college students.
I guess the one piece that I missed is, and so why is that happening now in this context?
Because they don't have their instrument in front of them is a big part of it, right? Because, other than say ensemble playing specifically, drum set lessons, I'm sitting behind my drums, they're sitting behind their drums, and we're actually trying to have a drum set lesson. When we get tired of that, we move away from the drums and we have some listening time. Or when we're in an ensemble situation where we don't have these instruments in between us. So we're actually able to say, let's listen to this Duke Ellington piece. And we can go further and we can say, okay, well, half the fun is on Such Sweet Thunder. And that whole suite was about Shakespeare. And then we can go deeper into that process of the way that literature is informing Ellington's work. And it has more depth. Where we're in an ensemble situation, we're spending time trying to figure out where to put the notes and where to put the notes together and how to blend and balance. And we don't have time for that story. And that's, for me, the biggest part of the conversation. And so now having an opportunity to actually explicate that is very meaningful to me as an educator, and hopefully to them as students.
Yeah, I agree. That's a real positive. Just that we do more listening, and I might share some things with them that normally I would assume they would be taking care of on their own, some of the history and stuff you're talking about. But as we all know, that's not necessarily what happens. And also, you don't know what you don't know, right? So sometimes I'm making perhaps the assumption that, well, okay, because I take this as the ground level, the basic that everybody knows who's coming to play this music, my grad students are aware of this particular thing. But because now we don't have the time to rehearse as much, to focus on the saxophone, to focus on the stuff that would normally happen in the lessons, it's just not a rewarding time. We have the time, but it's not rewarding to spend it on Zoom that way. And sometimes not possible. Because we don't have that, we find out where some of those holes actually are. And sometimes they're quite surprising. So in a way, I'm getting to know what they know a little bit better than I would, I think, if I was just running an ensemble traditionally. Now, if I was running an ensemble traditionally, I would know how well they could play. I would know that kind of what they know much better than I know right now. But in terms of knowing what they know about the music in a broader sense and deeper sense, that you're right, absolutely. That's one of the rewards.
Okay, Lance, you can ask a question. It's your show.
Well, I wanted to just ask Ben, because you said your parents were at the University of Denver, and that was where Elwood Murray, I mean, it was actually a hotbed of general semantics.
That's right. Yeah.
Back in the day. Were they friendly with Elwood Murray then?
Yeah. Growing up, and my brother Adam and my sister Elisa, who are both present at this meeting, will attest that every year at our house we had the Elwood Murray party. It was an annual party that originally was the purpose was to celebrate Elwood Murray's accomplishments and to honor him as the former chair of the department and the kind of ongoing spirit of the department. And it was a party it was a potluck party attended by all the graduate students, and it was raucous. It was like a real party that would often last until 3 or 4 in the morning. And we loved it. Potluck. We could eat everything we wanted, and we'd wake up the next morning and there would be like 17 kinds of cake left over that we could eat for breakfast. So yeah, Elwood Murray was a big presence. A big presence. When Elwood retired as the chair of the speech communication department, my father took over as chair.
Oh.
So there was like kind of a lineage there.
So you probably had some connection to Frank Dance as well.
Frank Dance was in that department, exactly.
Who was originally from Brooklyn and a graduate of Fordham University.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And also Carl Larson.
And you did an album called Speech Communication?
Speech Communication, that's right.
I was wondering if you could say something about that.
Well, that record was recorded, actually, it was kind of a sad time because that album was recorded during the time that my father was kind of entering his final days. He was sick and he passed away not too long after we made that record. So it's kind of a remembrance, for me, a remembrance of him. And that's a record that I made with a trio of myself and Greg Cohen played the bass and Kenny Wallison played the drums. It's a cool record. And one of the songs, I think the first song on that record is called Language Behavior. Language Behavior, because after my father passed away, I hadn't known about this, but he edited a book. I don't think he wrote it exactly, but it was a compilation of writings in the field of speech communication. But the title of the book was Language Behavior. And it was the kind of thing that you come across and you think like, wow, this guy was deeper than I realized, like that you would call a book Language Behavior, for example, rather than How Language Behaves or The Behavior of Language or something like that, but just calling it Language Behavior just really struck me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think it's time to listen. I think,
Yeah, to another song.
yeah. Do you guys want to pick a cut?
How about one of yours, Geoff?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. We talked about this so complicated. Let's see. Okay, one moment, and I'll get that up. We talked about 3/4/5. Shall we do that one?
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that there's a the title in this case is actually very literal. But should I say what it is first, or shall I leave it for quiz time afterwards?
Quiz time.
Okay, quiz time it is. Here we go.
How did we ever do that?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Not easily from what I remember. It seemed like it would be so easy when I wrote it. I don't know. It was easy at home in my living room before you guys showed up.
I would like to say something. I was married to Bob Kindred, tenor saxophonist, and my sister was married to Mark Popkin, great bassoonist. And she kept bugging me to write something for the two of them. And I couldn't imagine what it would be. Now I know what I could have done.
Beautiful, thank you.
Gorgeous.
Any takers on the quiz time part? The 3, 4, 5? No, not you, Ben. Not you either, Dana.
I kind of know.
Well, there's the trick, right? Well, it's on the stuff to share here.
I was thinking it was time signature, but I couldn't count it.
You're close. I mean, you're really close, actually. So most of the piece is improvised, right? Just the short melody in and short melody out. And the melodies on either side, they're the horns playing a short figure together, and then the drums, then the horns, then the drums, then the horns, then the drums. 3 figures, right? And then we repeat them with a slight variation the second time. And each time the drum solo is slightly longer. First time it's 3 measures, second time it's 4 measures, third time it's 5 measures. And that's it. No Rosetta Stone. It was really just a placeholder title for me. I don't know what I'll call this. Look at the multi-rests, 3, 4, 5. That was it. And it was just, it seemed as good as a placeholder.
It was cool.
Nice tune, Geof.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fun one. It's more fun once you learn how to play it.
For me, too. Well, I seem to remember I was going to play that on saxophone, and then that day in the studio decided to play it on bass clarinet.
Good choice.
It's your fault.
Yeah, I like it on bass clarinet. It sure is a lot harder on clarinet. Sorry, Ben.
It's
No,
hard.
that's all right. I forgive you.
Thank
As long
you.
as you're suffering next to me on the bass clarinet.
Right. Yeah, well, I guarantee you I'm suffering more on the bass clarinet than you are on clarinet.
Can I throw out a kind of a big question to our panelists here? And it comes off of something that you're working on, Dana, in your doctoral work in ethnomusicology. You're researching ethnicity, identity, and temporality. And temporality in particular is important in the field of general semantics, as Korzybski would reference the notion of time binding, that temporality that makes us unique as humans. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your work in that area in identity and temporality, and then also you're looking at music as protest and resistance, and maybe all of our panelists can talk a little bit about how the music that you're making may hopefully have a slight bit of an impact on the world. Okay, Dana, you want to start?
Sure. Well, temporality, I was originally, the idea of temporality in music was suggested by my interest in the music of Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa, one of the interesting things that he would do as a composer and really as an orchestrator is he would take different performances, maybe of the same piece, but not always. And he would combine them in the studio in a way that was very seamless and really didn't question the idea and the notion of time. And he did it in a way that seemed like the piece could not have been in existence without all of those parts in that moment in time, when in fact they could have crossed decades, crossed continents, personnel. There was nothing that was not variable in his approach to combining works to create a new work. And so that was something that I thought was pretty interesting. And I wrote a paper and presented a paper at a conference on that idea of temporality in the work of Frank Zappa. In fact, I called the paper "Ketchup is a Vegetable." And, sort of the way that you think about what is music. Now, is that music? And is that a performance? So I was calling into question those types of issues. So that's also something that I'm thinking about more broadly in my research of the temporality, the idea of time continuum. and music and rhythm and rhythmic language creating a continuum. And particularly when I think about Black music, and thinking about rhythmic continuum, we think about Ghana to Haiti, Cuba, Dominican Republic, right? And we think about rhythmic continuum in the way that rhythms shapeshift based upon geography in very subtle ways. It's also something that I'm thinking about, like this timeline. I was listening to this radio report on Tony Allen. Tony Allen was the great drummer that, in collaboration with Fela Kuti, created Afropop. He came of age in the mid 1960s and sort of created this unique way of playing the drum set that combined elements of jazz and high life and other popular musics of West Africa, and did it in a way that if you listen to Calypso from that period, you say, well, that's kind of the same thing. Or if you listen to Art Blakey, you'd say, well, that's kind of the same thing. And you don't have a sense of geography in his playing. So place, representation, location, time, those are some of the things that I'm thinking about with temporality. As far as music as protest and struggle, I think all the music that we're making is protest music. All the music that we make is about social injustice. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about identifying problems, if you will, and offering solutions. And sometimes those offerings are subtle, and sometimes they're more overt and direct. But I think that particularly improvising musicians and musicians that are working in the music that we're working in. So that could be Bob Dylan. That could be what we're doing. That could be Stevie Wonder. Like, we're all working in the same area, the same arena, and that is protest music. That is music that is speaking to injustices in our world. And I hope that the type of work that we do, not only it provides healing for people, entertainment in a small word, but healing, but it also makes people think about creating spaces for that type of healing. And I think when you create those types of spaces, the world's better, right? If people are all thinking about music making and creating spaces for art and for culture, for literature, for the embracing of science, when they create those types of spaces, then we're not fighting about other things or anything. So that's the type of work that I think that the three of us are doing, is certainly the type of work that I'm doing. Again, sometimes directly, very specifically, with language, with the instruments that I'm using, with the volume that we're playing with, and sometimes in very subtle ways, but always.
Any of our other guests want to chime in?
Well, I want to I want to just mention one thing that's been on my mind recently that I feel like it relates to what Dana's talking about, because one of the experiences that we have when we make music and when we're trying to find the right shape for music, and like we were talking about earlier, like the way the three of us got together when we were going to make this record that we've been listening to, we got together with some written material, and we had the task before us was kind of like, what shape is it going to be? What comes here? What goes there? How long should this be? Do we need to repeat the C section or whatever? And like, I've been really thinking about those types of questions that we face every day as musicians. How much is enough? Does it need more? Does it need less? And we're looking for some sense of balance or symmetry or a beautiful asymmetry or whatever it is, that there's something in us that's searching for something. And I feel like that's the same impulse and the same yearning and the same necessity that we feel when we yearn for justice and mercy. I mean, because we're drawing on the same thing that's in us as human beings, which is some sense of what's right. That's what musicians are always asking themselves: what's right? What's the right thing to do here? Well, how is this going to sound right? And it's deeply connected to what we might think of as resistance or healing or search for justice and like that. So I feel like on the deepest levels that we're trying to gain access to in ourselves as musicians, you're talking about something that is kind of on a molecular level. It's related to the search for justice and equity.
I'll tell you what makes me feel wonderful. And I'm going to go back to my show, but it's Bending Towards the Light is the title. Bending Towards the Light, a jazz nativity. And all the way through it, every single one of the people that's in it, the story is told first, and then it goes into Deck the Halls, which lasts for half an hour. And every single person has its space. I mean, one saxophonist, then another, who's Phil Woods has been in it, John Gordon, Darman Meter from the New York Voices, Andy Fusco, Virginia Mayhew, but that will play a chorus and then all play together. They are having such a wonderful time. And the audience knows they're having a wonderful time. And it can be a piece of traditional music, and then it can go into Kirk New Rock. You can imagine what you all must know Kirk. Crazy and wonderful. But by the end of the show, and the final stuff is, you are like a light for the whole world. Let your light shine. And there's the feeling in the room, the feeling not just with all of the players who come back year after year to do it, is so incredible that everybody is just on this wonderful high. It's like all of the darkness of the world. And that's what Charles Corral says in the beginning, that even in a time of darkness, we may begin to see the world bending towards the light. And that's what goes into the show. And it does. And what's so incredible, and who knew? I was asked to write it by John Garcia Gensel at St. Peter's Church. And I don't know why he suggested me. But anyway, what it has turned into is something that brings such joy. And every one of these people have the opportunity to express themselves, and other cities have done it. And the musicians there step out, and they're heard by people that hear them play in a dance band somewhere. All of a sudden they have this opportunity to play this incredible solo. And I think it's really up to us to bring light to the world, because it sure is a dark time. End of speech.
I mean, it strikes me like what all of, and I certainly don't want to follow any of you. Good Lord, that was fantastic. But I'll say something anyway and stick my foot in it. It seems like in a lot of ways what we're all talking about is connectivity, like feeling really deeply, meaningfully connected to each other on the stage, to the other people involved in the production, to the musicians, to the audience. And I think of that connectivity and feeling it in that real way, like that's real social change. If you really feel connected to another person who has a very independent, different existence from yours, maybe a completely different background in race, gender, age, everything else, it's really hard to treat that person as less than your equal or less than another human being once you've felt that connectivity. And I think that is a really powerful thing that the arts in general doing, as some folks are saying in the chat, not just music, of course. And for me, it's connecting in those ways to the musicians on the bandstand, to the audience, and also the responsibility of connecting with your heritage, your lineage as a musician, and the people who came before you. So, and to the timeline, the people who are coming afterwards, your students or young musicians or artists who are coming up, and it really spreads that connection over space and time in this way that can provide, for me anyway, can provide real meaning to what I do as an artist, even though a lot of it is, being an athlete of the very small muscles and all the work that takes. Going out and having those experiences is what makes it okay to sit in my basement for several hours a day doing the other part of it.
That's time binding, by the way, those connections between generations. That's exactly what we mean by time binding.
A shepherd boy who is sometimes a shepherd girl, because there are 4 shepherds, baritone singer, a tenor singer. Phil Woods was the first shepherd. Matter of fact, I have to tell you, he was a king. And then we decided to have the first Noel really be a showcase for one of the shepherds, and it had to be Phil. So we had to call him and say, Phil, it's going to be a change this year. You're going to be a shepherd. And there was this long silence, and he says, what next, a camel? And but those 4 shepherds, one of them is a little boy. So we have a child who's about 8, and then Candido, who played it last year, and he just died at 99. So that's our stretch of age.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to go back to what Geof had just been saying. And again, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and you guys, the trio, tell me if I'm wrong. So there's this tradition in jazz music where everybody steps up and takes their solo. And I listen to this record, and I don't hear that tradition. I hear 3 people listening to one another and playing with each other throughout, right? And so as we're speaking to, all of these ways in which it's protest music, it's about bringing harmony in dark times and whatnot. I mean, is that difference from that jazz tradition where let me step out and, do my spot versus listening to one another, being in that communicative space, that context with one another? Am I misspeaking about what you did here?
I just have to say one thing. When you see I hope you see the show. When you see Lou Soloff and then Warren Vichet come and then play alone and then each together it's hysterical, and it's so loving that they hug each other at the end. So that is the kind of thing, and there's a lot of that.
I mean, I would say that there are definitely similarities to what you describe as something that would be a more traditional approach of a soloist stepping to the fore and receiving the spotlight. There's still a fair amount of interaction that goes on.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
there's still
a lot.
A reliance on the unspoken words.
What's interesting to me is that a lot of people who are non-jazz people assume, sorry, I think I turned off. A lot of people think that it's a competition. I'm going to play better than you, something. When you see this show, that's not it. The love that's coming and admiration from each person, whether they're somebody else on the same instrument or not, is so great that it's just this wonderful family. And that's what so many of the players and the audience talk about it like a family coming together every year and loving each other.
Well, yeah. I also think that there is room for healthy competitiveness.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's part of the tradition. So if you think about, like I say, a tradition in jazz of black athleticism in jazz, right? Like this is a thing, and people egg each other on sometimes in a very positive way. Like you think
Yeah.
about like Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins with Dizzy Gillespie, right? So for me, maybe the classic example where Gillespie was notoriously encouraging it. You know.
Yeah.
Who won that one? I forget.
Yeah, you can. I think that there's no winner, right? We're all winners.
To speak more directly to your question about the way that we were approaching it and the pieces that you've played, one of the things that I've been listening to and reflecting on is similar to Geof, the piece that you wrote, in that you mentioned the piece for 9 musicians, for 9 improvisers. So the idea of yes and, Geof, you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that maybe addresses some of Tom's question.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I mean, so Dana and I, our previous project together, and in fact, we were playing the release concert for it when we agreed to do this project with Ben, which is also kind of funny. He was there the night we were playing it for the first time. It's a piece for 9 musicians, and I won't get too deeply into it, but it's just called Yes and Music for 9 Improvisers, and it takes its name from the Compass Players in Chicago, the improv group that became Second City in Chicago, that then so many went on to be on Saturday Night Live and other things like that. But there were writers, Elaine May, actors, all sorts of folks involved, and their basic premise comes from Viola Spolin's theater games, where one of those is somebody introduces a premise, and the only other rule is that you agree with their premise and you add to it. You can't say no. You say, oh, of course, and you add something else. And when I read about that, I thought it was just a kind of perfect example of what has to go on the bandstand in many ways. If Dana or Ben introduces some idea, I can't take that idea away. It happened. Maybe it wasn't like what I had in mind to happen next if I'm in a super controlling type A kind of vibe or something. I never really feel like that, actually. But if I were to feel that way, I still can't make it go away. It happened. I have to respond to it. And I have to now accept whatever they introduced as one of the characters in our improvisation. To me, that's a huge win. It means I get whatever they do for free. I don't have to think of everything myself. Thank God. Right? I'm sorry, Dana, go ahead.
So I was just saying, so that in listening to the pieces that have been played today, and the way that we play on the recording, that's what I hear a lot of. So rather than feeling the need for like, okay, someone's soloing and now 2 people are providing support, there is this constant conversation of us saying yes to each other and then adding something else to the conversation, to us not giving up on an idea, not abandoning an idea because we think we have something more intriguing to say. Right? It's just us constantly, without chasing each other's tail, but really sort of being supportive and encouraging and agreeable, and also at times confrontational. Like, okay, now we're going to do this tempo. Okay, now we're going to try this. Now we're going to play a little bit louder. Now we're going to be more boisterous. Now we're going to make more of the dynamic. So we are competitive in nature on the recording and trying to elevate each other to new heights, but we're also very complementary.
It's in good nature, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I think that's one of the differences that we might find with a more mainstream situation where all eyes are on that person that is taking the solo, and a lot of what is happening is in support of that statement.
Right.
Whereas here, all of our statements are created equal.
Yeah. Right.
At this point, I'd like to jump in and just open this up now to the time that's left for some questions and answers. And Gary Gumpert has been waiting patiently in the wings to ask a question. So Gary, we're going to start off with you.
Now you have to unmute yourself.
You're muted, Gary.
You know that.
There you go.
Sometime in, I think it was 1966, I had the opportunity to do a television show with Gary Carr and Gene Wright. For me, at least, the two most outstanding bass players that I knew of. And my question really is whether you could comment on the concept of mixing genres and what happens. And the second question that I have is, have you thought of composing via the Zoom?
Well, Gene Wright's probably most well known for his work with Dave Brubeck, a fantastic musician. So yeah, wow, that must have been wonderful. Was that recorded, that interview, or?
I wish I knew. It was a performance at the University of Wisconsin. I was directing the television show.
Okay, wow.
It was an extraordinary experience.
Well, so when you say mixing genres, can you be more specific? Music is so universal in that sense. Like, what belongs to one genre more than another? Who defines what genre is? Is that a marketing scheme? Is that something so that when we all go to Apple Music and we type in a word, we come up with familiar artists? So if we put in Rolling Stones, are they a blues band? Are they a rock band? Are they a pop band? And Waiting on a Friend, when Sonny Rollins takes the saxophone solo, is it now a jazz band? So this idea of genre and mixing of genres, I think, yeah, I can't, yes would be the short answer.
But someone like Gary Carr, I don't know whether you're familiar with him. Gary, and I worked with Gary for a long time. His whole being was to break barriers, to work with other musicians.
Yeah.
And that's why I mentioned genres.
Yeah. With respect to composing on Zoom, and I think we can all jump in on this, the short answer for me is yes, absolutely. I think that what we've been charged with doing since April, since mid-March, is imagining how we can collaborate and create with people inside of a box, and to use technology to do so in a way that is meaningful and is not a compromise. So I think that we're all trying to figure out the ways that that's possible. Whether that is allowing for more space for the latency, or modifying the instruments that we're utilizing in that space, or thinking of ways that we can combine different medias, whether it be projection or setting up multiple cameras, just ways that we can really heighten our understanding of technology so that we can collaborate across the miles and do so in real time rather than sharing files with each other. But I'll let my colleagues speak more to that. What they're thinking about.
I mean, I'll let Ben address it. We gave it a whirl pretty early in COVID, some duo improvisation playing. And I think since Ben came up with a lot of the parameters, I'll let him describe it if he's game.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was, I kind of feel like that was, in some ways, it wasn't exactly like playing music on Zoom, in the sense that, well, my idea was, we can't be together in the same room to play together, but we can be together at the same time playing together. So the idea was, why don't we decide something like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to play an 8-minute duet, and then at 3:15 we'll play a 5-minute duet and stuff like that. So Geof and I agreed on some parameters like that, and each of us in our own house recorded our part of the duet, so that we were playing together at the same time. We couldn't hear each other, but we were imagining each other, and we each contributed our part, and then we put them together, put the tracks together, using the multi-track recording system to see what we had. And well, it's funny. We kind of had a false start. It's funny. We did it once, and I came to the conclusion that I wasn't playing enough. And I think, Geof, you came to the conclusion that you'd like to play a little bit less or something. And then
You're saying it the nice way. I came to the conclusion I was playing way too much.
that wasn't my conclusion. So then we just decided, okay, let's make an adjustment and try it again. And that time it seemed to work pretty good. Actually, we came up with some nice stuff. And but that wasn't exactly like playing together on Zoom.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not quite the same. And I was starting another composers collaborative thing with some friends, Matt Eulery and Quinn Kirshner and Russ Johnson, right before this hit, that we didn't follow through. I think because everybody was just kind of shell-shocked when it did hit and lasted as long as it did. But I'd like to return to, which was kind of doing a round-robin composition thing of, I'll write one idea, put it in the Dropbox. The next person to get my idea, and we'll just go alphabetically. You know, whoever's idea I'm behind in the circle, I'm the second on their idea, and somebody else is the third, and they just keep on making their way out around the circle until we have something we agree we can play. But the idea was never to do it exclusively on Zoom or Dropbox or anything. It was just to make some gestural pieces that we could explore in rehearsal and then flesh out the way that Ben and Dana and I did. So now this would be a very different proposition.
Yeah.
I just ask, Gary, you said you knew Dana's father and you knew Harry Weinberg. Could you just clarify that?
There was a whole group, including Frank Dance and everyone else, and they got together. The first time I met them, I think, was 1962 in Chicago at what was then called the Speech Association of America. And both of them played a prominent role in those early years and served transitionally when it morphed into the National Communication Association.
That's Harry Weinberg, you mean?
Yes, Harry was.
And you knew Dana's father?
Excuse me?
Dana's father?
I'm sorry.
You had written that you knew Dana's father too?
Yes, not very well, because I was a young graduate student. But those were early mentors.
We have other questions on the panel?
I have a question, but first I have a comment. Ben, when you were talking about getting it right, feeling of getting it right, I was thinking, an image came into my mind from geology. When a crystal unfolds, it unfolds in the same pattern every time. And I was thinking that as a musician, there is that same sense, and it might not be definable, but I happen to think the general semantics and jazz are related because it expands, and the best way to describe jazz is there's always an etc., and that it's never completely defined. But my question for all of you really goes to, I'm thinking of a quote from Mozart about silence. And I'm also thinking about Chet Baker, because some of the silences, I'm a big fan of his, pierce my heart when he plays. And Mozart said the music is not in the notes, but in the silence in between. And in general semantics, we talk about how difficult it is not to name things. So I wondered if you could respond.
I'll leave it to those on the panel who are smarter than I am.
Got it, Ben.
You're the intellectual.
Yeah,
you read the book.
You did all the readings.
The point of my story was that I never made it. Well,
By the way, I forgot to mention, with Marsalis did do a concert with all of his musicians playing at once. And it was fantastic. And it was an homage to people who died with COVID. He was doing it for a while on Sunday nights. I'm going to check it and see if he still is.
I don't have anything to add to what Mr. Mozart has to say about music.
Silence. I think that for the three of us, particularly as composers, that's probably, at least I'll speak for myself, but probably it's hard to write the silence in music. It's hard to create the spaces for to allow folks to get inside of it, as you just spoke about Chet Baker's music, right? The beauty of Chet Baker's work is he provides you with a space for contemplation. And composers generally, we're so interested in making, putting the things in there that we don't allow for that breath. And so I think when Mozart is speaking about, that beauty in the silences, because Mozart wrote a lot of notes, right? But it's leaving that space for the heart, I think, is really what that speaks to. I think the greatest music allows us to get inside of it. I think that's probably true, of great literature, right? And I think that there is this again, disconnect with trying to name it. It's hard to name it, right? Which it's an opposite general semantics. You're trying to name it, right? But yeah, that's hard to name.
We're trying to say you can't name it.
Yeah, right. Indeed. Yeah, I agree with that, Lance. Yeah.
I think, that's one of the things that, in a very different way, sets the Art Ensemble of Chicago apart early, right? Is what I think Lester Boyer, Roscoe Mitchell, one of those folks in an interview in George Lewis's book, says, when they got to France, people didn't know what to think because they were laying down these big chunks of silence, like just nothing was happening for a minute, 2, 3 minutes, like no sound. And I think that's an amazing thing to think about, because then when there is that silence and the sound resumes, you don't take it for granted. It has a different meaning. And I think that's one of the things that Ben and I were kind of talking about with the play less, play more thing on the duos. Like, at least my feeling was Ben was playing as if I was there, and he was leaving a lot of space for me to play in, whether or not I played in exactly that same space. But he was creating this opportunity for that to happen by leaving these long chunks of silence, whereas I was playing, remember, we're doing this blind, more as if I was playing a solo concert and had to maintain some sort of momentum. But then I realized I don't even have to do that if it's a solo concert. Like, I mentioned Steve Lacy earlier. I know we're probably all fans of Steve Lacy's solo Monk recording, just Monk on soprano sax. And, my reaction, if I was going to play that, I played it a while ago, in fact, but my first reaction would be, I have to somehow outline all the harmonies and fill in all the missing parts that the piano and bass and drums would normally play with just the saxophone. And when I first heard Lacy's, he didn't do any of that. He just played the melody, nothing else. I mean, for me, one of the other biggest moments in my life of recognizing how effective that was with the great Chicago piano player, Jody Christian. And Jody, I'd hired him to play a restaurant gig, which is just kind of unbelievable to me that he would play duo in a steakhouse with a young musician, as this kind of legendary guy. And I expected him to play the way piano players play when you're just playing duo with a horn player. They play the bass, they play orchestrally, lots of notes. He played left-hand chords and a little bit of melody as if there was a whole rhythm section there. And he didn't fill in any of the blanks. Mm-hmm. And there was just this completely different feeling of space. I said, what do I do? Well, I guess I just play with him. And I don't have to fill in all those spaces either. Anyway, it was really, really an amazing experience in an unamazing place.
Well, can you imagine that the Jazz Nativity starts in the absolute darkness, solo tenor saxophone playing Silent Night? That's a lot of space when everybody feels it.
We have any other questions? I kind of want to make sure we get one more piece in before we finish tonight.
Any particular
The general semantics piece.
We started with that one.
We started with.
No, I didn't hear.
Want to hear Ben's birthday song? I mean, it's already past Ben's birthday again, but it's a nice one. Or the Ellington we've talked about some.
And I'd love to hear that.
Great.
Got it, Tom?
One sec. Mm-hmm.
Nice arrangement, Geof.
Thanks, Ben.
Damn.
Great contralto clarinet playing.
Right.
Too bad I couldn't get it in tune at the beginning.
You're alone. You're in tune with God. You're in tune with what you need to be in tune with. I had a tuba player tell me that in school one time.
Nation is, it's a variable concept.
Truth.
Well, that was great, guys. Really. I guess I should turn it over to Lance to bring this to a close, but I just want to say that, it was really beautiful. We're so glad you all showed up to share your music with us and that we got to talk and listen. Ken?
It was a thrill. Thank you. It was a
Thank
thrill.
you so much for having us. Thank you for having us. Hey, actually, before we go, I'd love to say thanks to one other person who's here who made it happen, and that's our publicist, Lydia Liebman, who has joined us, and she's the reason you heard it on Fresh Air. So thanks, Lydia.
Thank you, Lydia.
Well, thank you, Lydia, and thank you very much, Ben, Geof, and Dana, and also to Anne. And once again, the CD or digital download of General Semantics, that's available for purchase, I understand? Yes?
I hope.
Yes, you can find it over on the Delmark website. You can also find it on Bandcamp if you look up my name. Or I kind of bet if you go to General Semantics on Bandcamp, there it is right there. Thanks, Lydia. You're awesome.
I also noticed it was on Amazon. I have it in my shopping cart there. So there are many ways to get a hold of it. And we certainly encourage everyone to go buy a copy and to support this wonderful effort. So again, thank you so much to Ben, Geof, and Dana, and to Anne, and we hope that we can have you back at some point and continue this discussion and expand upon it. Thank you to Ed and Tom for magnificent moderation in all things. And thank you all for coming. We'll let you know about our next event for the New York Society for General Semantics. We'll see if we can squeeze one in before the end of the year. I'm not sure, but we'll see. But in any event, just keep in touch, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again before too long. Best wishes to all of you for the holidays. And again, thanks for coming. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
all.
you to you, Lance, too, for putting it together.
Really.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And buy music, don't stream it. Buy it. Buy records.
The records.
Please.
Indeed. Take care, everybody.
Nice.